Help me to speak, Jesus. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Who's ready for Christmas, huh? Okay, now, not the shopping part. Who's ready for Christmas? Oh, a few. I don't like Christmas, usually. But I'm trying to get in the spirit this year. And so for the next couple of weeks, we are going to have a whole Christmas series on Advent. Advent is a time of year, it's part of a more liturgical tradition in the church, but it just means, Advent means coming. It's a time of remembering the coming of Jesus. It's the four Sundays before Christmas. This is the first Sunday in Advent. And typically there's a couple of different themes that you can do it. Sometimes they do different orders. Sometimes there's different ways of describing the four themes. But the four themes that we're going to go with this week is hope. We're going to talk about hope today. That Christmas gives us hope. Then next week's going to be peace. And then joy. And then love. It's the four gifts of Christmas. And then Christmas Eve, we'll have a Christmas Eve service, and that one's going to be about Jesus himself. But this week is about hope. It's about hope. And I pray that this gives you hope today. And I want to begin by just describing what is hope itself. Why do we need it, and what is it? We need it because this world seems sometimes quite hopeless. There's the studies that have been discussed over whether or not the world is getting better or worse. And generally people don't think it's getting better, and I think that's accurate. But the studies try to argue that no, it is. And it's because they're saying, well, education is getting better. Well, education doesn't necessarily make you happier, does it? And well, there's less poverty in the world. Well, yeah, that's good. But having money doesn't necessarily make you happier either, does it? Oh, it makes you more comfortable, but it doesn't necessarily make you happier. Doesn't mean that necessarily you're kinder to your neighbors. The world isn't getting better. Interesting, there's one of my favorite poems written in 1919 by a guy named Yeats. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. Yeats. Yeah. Some of you may know this poem. I'll read the first half of it. Turning in an ever-widening gyre, that's a circle. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, and the blood-dimmed tide is loosed everywhere. The ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. It speaks of a time 100 years ago, looking into the future, that society seems to be unraveling, that it's losing its center, that which seems to be keeping it together. It's this image of a falcon who's supposed to be circling around its owner and staying within close proximity, but it seems to have lost it, and it's just kind of going off the rails. That the world is blood drenched, that innocence is lost, that the best in our world have no convictions. And is that not more true even today than it was 100 years ago? And the worst, interesting, the worst people in society actually have more intensity, more passion. And that's 100 years ago. It's at the end of World War II, there was many philosophers, some of the names you would know, one of them is C.S. Lewis, was looking out at the world when it became clear that the Allies were going to win. And they were considering what is society going to be like, what's the world going to be like post that day. And it was not hopeful. You could read about that in one of his books, Abolition of Man. And there was many of them that were coming to the same conclusion. In that book, he put it this way: the world is letting go of Christian values of God himself, and yet is expecting the world to continue to live on being Christian. It's like, as he put it, castrating the horse and asking it to be fruitful. It can't work. And so they were looking out into the world going, there's no way that our society, our world is going to be able to hold together having abandoned God. And that was 1943. And I think they were absolutely right. Life seems to be unraveling. And whether it's things like suicide rates skyrocketing, it's not just hype. It's not an illusion. It is actually getting greater today than it ever has. Drug rates increasing, depression increasing. People are worried about all kinds of things. Healthcare, bills, fulfilling job, meaningful relationships. People are lonely, stressed out, fearful. And politics is broken. Families are broken. Nothing seems to be going well. And you're like, yeah, we need hope. There's a famous quote, they don't know exactly who gave it, that man can live 40 days without food, about 3 days without water, 8 minutes without air, but only for a second without hope. I think that's true. We need to hear it because we can't live without it. But the truth is, the Bible gives us hope. He is the God of hope. And there is hope. And I want to take a moment and just help you understand what do we mean by hope? Each one of these, I want to explain a little bit what it is. In this case, it's not a wish. It's not wishful thinking. It's not just optimism. Hope differs from wish in that there's an expectation that it will actually occur. It's not a feeling, but it does produce one. It's very close to anticipation. So I was teasing Tom earlier about it. It's a wish that the Dallas Cowboys will win the Super Bowl. There's no grounds for it. On the other hand, it's an expectation, a hope that my boys will get Christmas presents this year. Because every single year they've had it. There's a reason for it. Hope looks at the evidence and says, this is what's going to happen. I expect it. Now, it's different from faith. And faith says, this is what I think is true right now. But hope is seeing the future and going, that is what I'm looking for. I long for that. And it's because of what I think is true now. That's what hope is. Hebrews 11:1, you know that verse, many of you, that faith is the assurance of things hoped for. It's the conviction, faith is the conviction that what you hope for is going to occur. You see the future, and because of what you know now, you expect that to occur. So we could rephrase the question of what does Christmas hope, what is our Christmas hope? We could restate it this way. What is the future expectation that Christmas generates? What do we anticipate because of Christmas? And to put it in a very simple phrase, that everything will get better. That we'll get back to Eden. Now at this point, I've been wrestling all week about how do I describe the hope of our faith. And it's interesting as you read through the New Testament and you start collecting some of these verses, it's all over the place in terms of describing the hope. And I don't mean all over the place in terms of just disparate ideas, although that's the case too, but it's throughout every book in the New Testament talking about hope in some way or another. It's saturated. Our God is a God of hope. And there's a couple of places we could kind of look to describe it, but I think one of them that I think is going to be really helpful because I want to paint a picture for you is actually in Matthew 19. In Matthew 19, this is talking about Jesus coming back, and he uses the phrase, when he sits on his glorious throne, he's going to renew everything. In Matthew 19, this is talking about his second coming, that there's going to come a day when he's going to sit on his glorious throne. And one of these days, and he uses the phrase, at the renewal of everything. That's our hope. And I want to use that as an image. But to begin with, Christmas is not just a hope coming, it's a hope fulfilled. Luke 2, we read this earlier. I'm going to reread it. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire world. Okay? First census, all right, next verse. And everyone went on their town to register. We know this. This is normal stuff. Normal politics, normal life. So Joseph went up from the town of Nazareth to Galilee with Judah, Bethlehem, the town of David. Real place, right? Real people. And he went there to register with Mary, who had pledged to be married to him, and she was expecting a child. How much more normal life than that, right? And there they were. And it was time for the baby. And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths. She placed him in a manger because there was no room. Boy, does that sound like a normal life in the sense of can't find a place to live. And there were shepherds just doing their job in the fields nearby, keeping their flocks at night. And we pause here and you think about life has been going on for these shepherds. Sometimes we forget about the fact that life has been moving on for a long time. But these shepherds are in a lineage of people who've been told a story all of their lives, just as many of you have, that starts all the way back at the beginning of creation. When we go to Genesis 3 and we hear about God, how he made the world and everything was perfect, right? You go back and read Genesis 1, you're going to go home and do that and look at the word good. It's repeated over and over. The implication is that God made everything and it was perfectly right. Everything is in its place. Everybody's relating to each other in the right way. Man and woman perfectly related to each other, to creation. Nothing's wrong. And of course you know the story, right? Adam and Eve sin, they ruin everything. And in the middle of that, God gives us a promise. Genesis 3:15. That somebody's coming. And so the wait begins. It's the wait that those shepherds are waiting for. That starting right there with Cain and Abel, is this the son that's coming that's going to fix the mess their parents made? No, obviously not. Cain kills Abel, and the mess gets worse. And the mess gets worse as we continue down through the biblical storyline. It gets worse and worse and worse. And God makes lots of promises. He gives lots of images of what he's going to do, like with the Noah story, that through this one guy, Noah, creation will get restored, sin will be dealt with, things will get renewed. But Noah isn't it. And after Noah, things don't get better. It gets worse again. And then you hear about Abraham and the promise for there that through this guy Abraham, the whole world will get blessed. And it's this beginning of this long trajectory of God promising over and over and over that someone's coming to fix the world's mess. that the whole nation, that through this one person, this one seed of Abraham, this one child from Abraham, all the families of the earth will be blessed. But the world doesn't get better. It gets worse. And child after child comes, baby after baby is born, and the world gets darker. And it gets passed on to Isaac and to Jacob, and then to his son Judah. And you end in the end of Genesis, and is life better? Is it back to this beautiful, perfect place where everybody's relating perfectly well? Oh no. Reread the story of the children of Israel. They were a very dysfunctional family. Life isn't better. You get to Exodus, and you get this amazing guy named Moses shows up, but he doesn't fix the problem either. Sometimes we forget the fact that you read through the law and the 10 Commandments, and you see all of this big stuff that he sets up, but it doesn't fix the problem. Does it get us back to Eden at the end of the Exodus story? Oh no. It's just another image of what one guy is going to do. And you get through that, and the promises keep rolling, and you see that Joshua comes on the stage, and he brings them into the promised land, and that's another image of Jesus that we're going to see, and Jesus is actually the same name as Joshua. But does Joshua fix the problem? Oh no. Judges is a hideous book. And Judges 19, what's happening in that could not be made into a movie. It is so bad. It's not, yeah. It's bad stuff. The world doesn't get better. It gets worse. And that's what we see as we continue down through the storyline of the Bible. Is baby after baby gets born, promise after promise keeps rolling on and on and on. We hear it's going to come through David, and the prophets start listing all of these people, all these descriptions about this person that's going to come. Isaiah 9, he'll be Almighty God. Isaiah 7, he'll be born of a virgin. His name will be Emmanuel. Micah 5, he'll be born in Bethlehem. Ezekiel 33, he'll be a shepherd to his people. Isaiah 35, he'll bring healing and joy. Isaiah 42, he'll be gentle. Jeremiah 23, he'll be a king. Psalm 2 and 72, he'll rule the nations. Psalm 110, he'll be a priest. Zechariah 9, he'll bring salvation. Isaiah 53, he'll bring the forgiveness of sins. Isaiah 61, he'll set them free. I mean, there's this explosion of promise after promise after promise. But think about those shepherds. God made a lot of promises. And they look out in the field and they see Romans are in control. The world keeps going on just like it is. Life isn't better. Maybe God doesn't keep his promises. And then we have the Christmas moment. We have that Christmas moment where the skies light up. It ends in the Old Testament where those shepherds are, where 400 years where God is absolutely silent. He doesn't have any more prophets. He doesn't talk. You ever feel like God is silent? Like maybe he's made a lot of promises, but the world just keeps going on the way it did. Well, that's where these shepherds are. And so we come back to Luke chapter 2, beginning reading again in verse 8. They're watching their flocks by night. You know the story. And then suddenly the skies light up. An angel of the Lord appears, and the glory of the Lord shone around them. They're terrified, understandably. And he says, don't be afraid. I bring you good news. Great joy. Why? Because the guy you have been hearing about, that you have been hearing the promises of over and over and over, he came. He's here. And so they go and they check it out and they go back rejoicing and they worship God and they're like, this is amazing. 30 years later, Jesus gets into the Jordan and gets baptized, and he calls the disciples, and these disciples are going around going, yes, we found the guy that he promised to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob and to David. Can you imagine the excitement? The world will get fixed now. And then he dies. Their hopes are crushed. Maybe it was all just hype. But Jesus does rise again, and he says, the restoring of things isn't happening yet. And so we're back to waiting. And that's where you and I are. We're waiting. So that in Matthew 19, where Jesus told them ahead of time that when he sits on his glorious throne, there will be a restoration. What did he mean? He means getting back to Eden. See, that storyline, and why I told you that is, it's hard for us to grasp the immensity of the hope that we have. And maybe the best way I could do that for you is just imagine life as if we get back to Eden, but only even better. Because our hope encompasses you individually, that your bodies will be right again. One of the effects of that Genesis 3 moment is that nature, our bodies, the world is not physically right anymore. Because something is born that way doesn't make it the way it's supposed to be. Just because things are the way they are, that's not necessarily the way it is. Everything is broken a little bit. And whether we're talking about moral issues or we're talking about things like arthritis, cancer, whether we're talking about, oil slicks, things aren't right. Physically are not right. But the promise is that one day it will be right. One day it will get fixed. We will physically be fixed. And it's not just us. All of creation will be renewed, remade new again, like the beginning. There's a restoring happening. And Romans 8 talks about that. Romans 8, starting in verse 16, describes how all of creation is groaning with us. It's starting here. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Okay, yep, check, got that. But now if we are God's children, then we are heirs. Oh, heirs of what? It makes you start to wonder. Heirs of and co-heirs with Christ. If indeed we share in his sufferings, we may share in his glory. What is he talking about? I consider our present sufferings, all the pains of this life, compared to the glory that is going to come, okay, for creation. My dog, the ocean, is eager for the moment that Jesus renews things. And it continues on in the same thing. For creation was subject to frustration, not by its own choice, by the will of one who subjected it, in hope of what? That it will be liberated along with us from the effects of the fall, is essentially what it continues on here. Where we get glorified, we get made back like with God. No disease, no deformity, no disabilities. And the closest sense that we can get to us for us human beings is looking at the resurrection of Jesus. And what did he look like? What was he like? Because you will get new bodies. 1 Corinthians 15 talks about that. But there's a moral aspect to it. John chapter 3, verses 2, 3 talks about when Jesus comes, we will become like him. Beloved, we are God's children, and what we will be has not yet been appeared, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him when we see him as he is. What is he talking about? Well, going back to the image of the garden, the first one is that it talked about how there would be thorns growing, how creation is twisted because of what happened in Genesis 3, but there was also a moral falling. And it talked about there where there's going to be a tension between the man and the woman, and that continued on not just between them and their children. Adam and Eve they had that Cain and Abel, and what a pain in her heart when one child kills another child. I mean, all of that broken relationships, he's saying all of that gets fixed too, because we will morally be right. We will have righteousness again. 2 Peter chapter 3 talks about we will have a home of righteousness where we will rightly relate to each other. How much of our pains and our sorrows in our lives are because other people sinning against us? A lot. How much of our anguish in our own hearts is because of our own sin? That's all gone. And I wish I could help you see it. I'm not even sure I can fully see it. There's a few passages that give you a sense of what this would be like. One is in Isaiah 11, where these natural enemies, people in this current present age, are fighting, but they won't. The wolf will dwell with the lamb. The leper will lay down with the young goat. The calf and the lion and the fattened calf together. And a little child will lead them. Can you imagine what it's going to be like when all of humanity rightly relates to creation again? And creation to itself? Creation is extraordinarily violent today. And that won't be. And it continues on and talks about how in our own hearts life will be different. The cow will graze with the young goat, and they'll lie down there. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra. The weaned child shall put his hand in the... No fear. No danger any longer. And the redeemed of the Lord shall return to Zion, and everlasting joy shall be on their head. That's the day that's coming. It's the Revelation 21 at the end, which I'm looking forward to eventually getting, where it says that God is making all things new. And there'll be no more crying, no more pain, no more sorrow. That day is coming. And we're so used to the day that we have today where it's just... And we live in the now where it's like, this is the way it is. You just, life is tough and you just got to grin and get through it. I get it. But there's coming a day where things will get renewed. And you ask how you know that's true, Brian. It's because of Christmas. They waited a long time, those shepherds. And God had made a lot of promises. But he kept them. We're in the same spot. And one day those skies will light up just like they did for those shepherds. And everything will change. I want you to have hope. I want you to have the hope that all the stuff that you struggle with now, the insecurities, the fears, the stress, the aches, the pains, that's all temporary. Christmas tells you that you can anticipate a new day. A day of everything being renewed back to the way it's supposed to be. And for us at this point, that's so hard to imagine because it's so far in the past. I've been imagining Adam. You know, after he has his little moment in the sun, so to speak, in chapter 3, he just completely disappears. But I wonder, you know, he lived many hundreds of years later. He if I calculated right, he lived up until the time of Noah. So he saw the mess that he created. And I wonder if on his day that he passed, because he died just like you and me, if God went to him on that moment. I mean, this is his first created human being. I could see him having a little different special relationship with that guy, you know? That he showed him, Adam, the mess is going to get worse. It's going to get worse, but I'm going to fix it. And I'm going to fix it with my second one just like you. It'll come. Just trust. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. And that's the message of Christmas. It'll be okay. One day God will fix it all. It'll fix it all for you individually. It'll fix it for all of creation. Creation will get right again. And that's true for everyone who puts their hope in Jesus. And if you will trust the promise, you will have joy and you will have peace. And that's what we'll talk about next week. Let's pray. Jesus, we need hope. Too often we focus so much just on right now, and we see, like Peter, going out on those waves. We look at the waves, we see the crashing darkness around us, and it at times, Jesus, it gets our eyes off of you, the one person who can fix everything. Lord, help us to keep our eyes on you this Christmas time.